essentially Joe Biden was giving this press conference talking about, America's involvement in the global response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And, I, as a leftist, have a lot of opportunities. Probably my default mode is to figure out, okay, where is Joe Biden going wrong? What could Joe Biden be doing better? But I came away from this speech very thoroughly impressed. Not only by the way that Joe Biden was not stumbling on things, knowing when to stop himself before he was going to get a little bit off candor, but knew the tone of the situation and stayed on message to say, listen, we are going to enact very tough sanctions that we have teamed up with other parts of the country. We're going to strain the most wealthy people in Russia as much as we can with their assets. And we're going to do everything we can up to firing bullets ourselves to show Russia that there are extreme, and other countries, by the way, there are extreme consequences for taking part in many of these actions. However, like we were saying earlier in this stream that we're doing, most regular people are not interested in a war. Most regular people are not interested in the United States getting into another conflict, whether that's United States citizens or people around the world. We're done with Team America World Police. And so and most countries don't want to put their people who are just coming out of COVID, who have economic anxieties of their own, they don't want to put them on the battle lines right now for this Russian-Ukrainian conflict or whatever it might unfortunately develop into. And so given that, I think Joe Biden was smart here in deflecting a bunch of nonsense that you were getting here from a lot of these people in the press who were asking questions. Not all the questions were bad, but I want to start playing. I have 4 clips here that I want to play from the address that Joe Biden gave just a day after this invasion started happening, because I feel like you start to get the tone of the media almost just vying, just so horny for war that it's disgusting. We just got to call it out here. So let me get this first clip ready. Again, this is Joe Biden speaking to reporters shortly after all the Ukraine stuff is happening.
The next question is, did you underestimate Putin, and would you still describe him the way that you did in the summer as a worthy adversary?
At the time, I made it clear as an adversary, and I said he was worthy. I didn't underestimate him. And I've read most of everything he's written. Did you read I'm not being a wise guy. You heard the speech he made, almost an hour's worth of speeches, why he was going into Ukraine. He has much larger ambitions in Ukraine. He wants to, in fact, reestablish the former Soviet Union. That's what this is about. And I think that his ambitions are completely contrary to the place where the rest of the world has arrived.
And with these ambitions, you're confident that these devastating sanctions are going to be as devastating as Russian missiles and bullets and tanks?
Yes, Russian bullets, missiles, and tanks in Ukraine. Yes, I am.
So there, Joe Biden goes hard in the paint over there, because the response is, the journalist is like, do you really think that your sanctions are going to be stronger than bullets and missiles and tanks? And Biden's like getting ready to square up, going, yes, better than our bullets and missiles and tanks in Ukraine. Absolutely. Because again, here, we don't want to go to war. Joe Biden, we gave him credit for getting a lot of heat from the American media last year in August of 2021 for pulling out of Afghanistan. And that was a tough call to make. He could have done that better and cleaner. But for like 3 presidents before him, Bush, 2, Obama, and Trump promised to get out of Afghanistan. None of them did it. And so the buck stopped with Joe Biden, and he was the first president in 20 years to finish what arguably a president before that started, right? And so I think Joe Biden is starting to create could be, again, I don't know how this is going to turn out, but right now where I'm standing, he's starting to create a legacy for himself where he's not going to take no shit from the warmongering media. If he is going to try to taper down these conflicts, because I think he understands that Americans are sick of this. I hope But based on what this press conference was and Biden getting closer to, oh, I know Joe's doing that off the cuff thing. I think off the cuff, he's speaking, no, you're not going to goat me into a war. No, you're not going to force me to say something that I don't want to on this. And that is a relief. As leftists, we should be relieved that a U.S. president is not being a war hawk when the media is feeding him opportunities to, and most presidents usually take the bait.
100%. It was kind of funny that we were both watching that press conference and we were both kind of having the same reactions because I pretty much liked everything that he's had to say. I think there's also another part of this that Joe Biden and the kind of the American establishment is realizing that this is not a situation that they're going to necessarily take the lead. There are other parties involved that have a lot at stake, especially Germany. Germany made a big decision by suspending Nord Stream 2, where they get, I think, 40% of their gas from Russia, from Nord Stream 1. There's going to be other parties involved. So it seemed like, although he didn't necessarily say it, it seemed like what he was doing was kind of saying, look, I'm talking to you about sanctions. We're not talking about anything else. And we're part of the reason why we're not talking about anything else is we haven't talked to the other parties about anything else. Us, Germany, France, whoever else is involved, UK, probably Ukraine. They don't want to make this situation be any worse than what it is. So we're talking about sanctions. But it was crazy to see those people in the media in that press room. Luckily, they're wearing masks. The only guy I liked was the guy from India. He was just like, "Oh, have you talked to India yet?" And it's a relief to hear answers that feel like a real answer. Whenever Trump talked about anything, you felt like he was just being disingenuous the entire time, or just being completely narcissistic. When the guy asked about India, he's like, we haven't talked with them yet. Somebody asked about China, he's like, I don't have an answer for that yet.
I want to be specific because I don't have that India clip right now, like ready for us. But like, it was a good moment, and like, there was an Indian reporter who, after all of this other warmongering bullcrap, I'm gonna like play for us at the very end. At the very end of this whole thing, the Indian reporter is like, "Hey, if you talk to India, because they're a major player here, that they may see some interest on Russia's side. They're not necessarily in the bag for the." NATO sort of alliance necessarily, right? So fair question. And Joe Biden's like, I don't know yet. And then China, Joe Biden said specifically, I'm not prepared to comment on that. So I think that's a deeper one right there. But I appreciate the off the cuffness. I have a few more clips here because what I really want to illustrate is how war hawkish the media is getting. And again, Joe Biden, homie, ain't playing none of that shit. And I'm so happy. Okay, here's some more.
President Biden, if sanctions cannot stop President Putin, what penalty can?
I didn't say sanctions couldn't stop him.
You've been talking about the threat of these sanctions for several weeks now.
Yes, but the threat of the sanctions and imposing the sanctions and seeing the effect of the sanctions are two different things. They're two different things. And he's going to begin to see the effect of the sanctions.
And what will that do? How will that change his mindset here, given he's
because
attacking
it will so
Ukraine
weaken his country that he'll have to make a very, very difficult choice as to whether to continue to move toward being a second-rate power or, in fact, respond.
There he goes again. Like, if the sanctions don't work, like, what are you gonna? If the sanctions can't stop him, what can? Is basically what she's doing. It's like, yo, sanctions are barely in place. Let's Bravo TV watch what happens before we talk about the next step. All right?
Yeah, I mean, definitely he stuck to his guns. I feel like this is my first time really watching him speak. I feel like I've avoided that the entire presidency because I'm just like, who cares? But this seemed important. And yeah, I mean, obviously I've seen clips of things he said, but like just sitting there watching the speech itself. And yeah, he was, like you said, he wasn't playing it. I do want to say something too about what he said about Putin wanting to reestablish the Soviet Union. And that's a kind of common narrative. And I think that notion is coming from an anti-Soviet Union place. I don't really think Putin's trying to reestablish the Soviet Union necessarily.
If I want to be clear, because we had this distinction earlier, I don't think Biden is coming from an anti-communist place. Because
Not
like,
no, yeah, like an anti-Soviet Union place.
Okay.
Yeah, because for better or worse, the Soviet Union was something that Putin has no interest in being. The Soviet Union, like I said, for better or worse, especially domestically, it was an entity that would support resistance movements worldwide, would support countries against colonialism, against all kinds of different things. So many movements around the world were supported by the Soviet Union, from Nelson Mandela to Castro's Cuba to in Angola, all over the world. Putin has no interest in that. He likes power and he likes wealth for him and his buddies, but he doesn't have any interest in like being a force worldwide against America. Absolutely not.
Yeah, definitely not. Okay, I want to go to this next clip. It's also really good.
Mr. President, if I can, you detailed some severe and swift new sanctions today and said the impact it will have over time. But given the full-scale invasion, given that you're not pursuing disconnecting Russia from what's called SWIFT, the international banking system, or other sanctions at your disposal, respectfully, sir, what more are you waiting for?
Specifically, with the sanctions we've imposed exceed SWIFT. The sanctions we imposed exceed anything that's ever been done. The sanctions we imposed have generated 2/3 of the world joining us. They are profound sanctions. Let's have a conversation in another month or so to see if they're working.
Dude, this is the Joe Biden that would like actually drum up support. Can you get this? Can you get like this about canceling student debt, please?
Yes, that would have been great if somebody asked him about that.
It's like, hey, your Ukraine stuff's very interesting, but while I have you, student loans.
He's like, yeah, get those out of here too.
Yeah, if we can get Uncle Joe on this kick, it's like one of those things where like, oh, you got to ask Dad when he's in a mood if you want to buy the video game.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's just really a shame. I mean, and I feel like I've talked about this on PowerPort so many times. During the Iraq War, I watched cable news every single day for at least 3 years, and they loved that war. Like they loved it. They all had the same rhetoric. They all just were they knew that they were making so much money off that war, and it feels like some of those people in that room, like they just remember that time. Like, oh, it was great. There was just so much money coming in. We were going on these assignments. I got to tell these stories, not thinking at all about the casualties of war that actually affect people and how it affected people all over the world, soldiers on either side. But yeah, they're just like bloodthirsty. Like that's going to be the best thing ever. If there's a war and I get to go cover it and be on the ground.
Yeah, it looks good for their careers. It's something that they can, elevate and talk about. But there's a real cost to war. And you know what? I would love if a lot of these journalists got this intense questioning on housing and homelessness or climate justice or why has Joe Manchin been the president up until this month, right? Like these are questions that I would like the press to come with this type of smoke with. But instead, Mr. Biden, why aren't you starting World War III sooner? Mr. Biden, why aren't you agitating Vladimir Putin? Mr. Biden, why aren't you? It's nuts. I have one more clip, but I also want to start to talk a little bit about the right-wing response and a little bit of the left-wing response as well. But last thing here, because Uncle Joe with one last smackdown. I didn't think I would like Joe Biden this much, but when it comes to fighting against the military industrial complex as it stands in the media. Now, keep in mind, Joe Biden just signed an increase in America's military budget, all right? So this isn't like Dwight Eisenhower Joe over here calling out the military industrial complex, right? Quite the contrary. In fact, quite the other side of Dwight D. Eisenhower in expanding the military, right? So, but it's important that in the media where a lot of people are getting these messages that Joe Biden is actively fighting, not just being on the defense of these war narratives, but actually fighting them and going on the offense and saying, no, it's just, I'm not going to fall for your games. So here's that last clip here.
What's the risk that we are watching the beginning of another Cold War, and is there now a complete rupture in U.S. and Russian relations?
There is a complete rupture right now in U.S.-Russian relations if they continue on this path that they're on. And in terms of a Cold War, that depends. You have the vast majority of the rest of the world in total opposition to what he's doing, from Asia to South America to Europe to around the world. And so it's going to be a cold day for Russia. The idea, you don't see a whole lot of people coming to his defense.
I think that's fairly true, at least from the outset, what we're seeing right now. People aren't rushing to Putin's defense. I think, and I've heard a take from a certain YouTuber I'm currently going after that I actually agreed with. That was that, listen, Biden could have made this kind of clearer rhetorically if he said, look, on behalf of NATO, or like whoever from NATO says this, we are not going to try to push for Ukraine to be a part of NATO. That would be a symbolic thing to say, but it would have been extremely, utterly clear, if it wasn't more unequivocally so already, that Vladimir Putin is acting not on some belief or some distrust of the American and European military hegemony, of some distrust that, oh, they say they don't want Ukraine to be part of NATO, but in reality, they're trying to proxy me and box me in here. There's no room for anyone, any potential ally of Russia even believing that kind of thing if the idea of Ukraine being part of NATO was off the table, rather than there was this thing with Ukraine, maybe flirting with NATO, having this, junior membership that could grow into something else. Maybe you could have been a little more unequivocal there, but I think it was already clear if you read the tea leaves, listen, we're not going to try to do anything active or move forward with NATO and Ukraine. Just try not to make it so, just Russia should not invade Ukraine. Otherwise, that's going to escalate into a different situation.
Look, that partnership thing, I'm pretty sure Colombia has that partnership thing with NATO too. I don't really think it's that serious. But yeah, that was when he said it's going to be a cold day for Russia. That was kind of funny.
That line was kind of hard, I'll be honest.
Yeah,
in response to the Cold War question.
Yeah, I think that the only countries that I've seen say anything in support of Russia was Venezuela. I would assume Bashar al-Assad did. I don't know. I didn't read anything. I saw Maduro say something in support of Russia. I guess the big one we're waiting to see is whatever China says.